Okay, so we're going to talk about imaginary numbers here a little bit. Okay, again, this is section 1.6. Okay, so some of the basics that you need to know on this section. Okay, and again, that's not this problem, but why do we need to do this? Well, what's the square root of 9? Everybody knows that it's 3. Okay, square root of 9 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, but what's the square root of negative 9? Okay, that one's a little bit more difficult because you can't do an imaginary number. 3 times 3 does not equal negative 9. There's no number that can equal up to this. Okay, and the way they've solved this is that they said you could break out the negative. So we can break this up into saying negative 1 times the square root of 9. Okay, this we know. We know that's 3. And what we do need to know then is the square root of negative 1 is going to be I. Okay, so make that note. The square root of negative 1 is I. So when I ask what the square root of negative 9 is, the square root of negative 1 is I. Square root of 9 is 3. So my answer, and I should always put the I last, is 3I. And that's how you do those problems. Okay. Okay. So the square root of negative 49, I'm going to break that up. I'm going to take the negative out, square root of negative 1, which I know is I, times the square root of 49. I know the square root of 49 is 7. So my answer is 7I. Okay. The next one. Okay. So based on that, and we have another one of those down here at the bottom, so we'll get back to that. Based on that, though, we can simplify equations that have I in it. Okay, so this is basic FOIL. First, 2 times 4. Okay, there's a outer, which is 2 times I, which is 2I. Inner, negative 3I times 4, which would be negative 12I. And then last, negative 3I times I is negative 3I squared. Okay, now let's simplify. 8 doesn't combine with anything. 2I and negative 12I becomes negative 10I. And then 3I squared. Well, what do I do with I squared? Well, I squared is equal to I times I. And I is square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1. And the square root of negative 1 squared, or times each other's, these just go away. It's negative 1. Okay. So I squared is negative 1. So this would be negative 3 or times negative 1. And negative 3 times negative 1 is positive 3. So that's where this goes. This goes right there. And then simplify. 8 plus 3 is 11 minus 10I. They're going to say, what's the real part of this? Well, obviously, what's the real number? The real number is 11. What's the imaginary portion of the solution? Negative 10I. All right. So that's how you simplify those. Let's do the same thing. Now, see, these two are multiplied by each other. This one, there's just a plus. Well, that's easy. If there's a plus ever between two parentheses, you just get rid of the parentheses. So again, I squared is negative 1. So we have 11 times negative 1 minus 6I plus 5 plus 4I. Simplify what you can. 11 times negative 1 is negative 11. Negative 6I and 4I, negative 2I plus 5. Simplify what I can. Negative 11 and 5 is negative 6 minus 2I. Is that one? Same thing. There's a plus in between. Hey, let's switch that. Let's go ahead and switch this and say it's a minus. That way we have one problem that's a minus. So make sure you switch that on your worksheet. Put a minus in between there. Because what should you do when there's a minus in between two of these parentheses? Well, you have to distribute the minus to both. So it'd be 18 plus 8i. Again, there's a minus here. So minus 4 minus a minus makes a plus 15i. So not that big a deal, but you got to make sure you distribute it to both. And then simplify what you can. 18 minus 4 is 14. 8i plus 15i is 23i. That's it. Clear that. Okay. So when they say simplify something that has an imaginary number in the denominator, people don't like that. They don't. You can't have an imaginary number in the denominator. So we got to get this out of there. Okay. And the way to do that, the way to get rid of this in the bottom is to multiply the top and bottom by the conjugate. The conjugate is, if it's a plus, the conjugate is a minus. Minus 3. 1 minus 3. What that'll do is that'll simplify out where you'll get rid of the i's. Okay, so up top, we got 10 times 1, 10. 10 times negative 3i, negative 30i. On the bottom, we got a FOIL. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times negative 3i is negative 3i. 3i times 1 is positive 3i. And 3i times negative 3i is negative 9i squared. Okay, I'm going to write the top again. We're not going to deal with that yet. 30i. And we'll simplify the bottom. Minus 3i and 3i, those will just cross off. I squared, what's I squared? Negative 1. So it'd be 1 minus 9 times negative 1. It's 10 minus 30i still up top. On the bottom, minus minus makes a plus. So 1 times 9 is positive 9. So 1 plus, so it'd be 10 minus 30i over 10. Now, what you have to check is, can you simplify this? And the only way to simplify it is if there's the same number that goes into all three. You can't just say, I'm going to divide 10 by 10 and then leave the 30 alone. It has to divide everything. Well, 10 goes into all three. So I can divide 10 on everything. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 30 divided by 10 is 3. And then I'm going to divide by 10 divided by 10, which is 1. And so when I divide by 1, it just goes away, and that's my answer. Okay. Simplify the square root of negative 75. Well, I can do that. I can bring out the negative 1 and then square root of 75. That's I. So starting point, that's I. Now, the square root of 75. Okay, so hopefully back when you took Algebra 2, in order to simplify a square root like this, you got to pull out perfect squares. Okay, and what a perfect square is 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100. Those are all the perfect squares that are less than 100. Okay, in order to simplify a square root, you can only pull out perfect squares. Okay, so which one of these goes into 75 evenly? 100 doesn't, too big. 81 doesn't, too big. 64 doesn't go into it evenly. 49 doesn't go into it evenly. 36 does not. 25, yes. How many times does 25 go into it? 3. Okay, square root of 25 is 5. Don't forget the I. So we have I times 5 times square root of 3. And then make sure you write this where the I comes second. 5I times the square root of 3. Here's your answer. All right, last one. Simplify this. The only reason it doesn't exist or it doesn't work is because the I is in the denominator. Can't have that. So we're going to multiply by the conjugate again. Okay, and again, we're only worried about the bottom one. So we're not going to do the conjugate at the top. We just care about the bottom. So 7 plus I, the conjugate is 7 minus I. And we just FOIL. 2 times 7 is 14. 2 times negative I is negative 2I. I times 7 is 7I. I times negative I is negative I squared. Do the bottom. 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times negative I is negative 7I. I times 7 is plus 7I. I times I is negative I squared. Simplify the top. I squared becomes negative 1. I can do that on the bottom too. It becomes negative 1. 14 minus 1 would be plus 1. So that'd be 15. Negative 2I plus 7I is plus 5I. Do the bottom. 49 minus a minus 1 would be 50. And then minus 7I and plus 7I, they just cross off. So it's just 50. Now, what goes into each one? What goes into 15, 5, and 50? The answer is 5. So I can divide everything by 5. Everything. So 15 divided by 5 is 3. 5 divided by 5 is 1. And you could have just put I over 50 divided by 5 is 10. And that's your answer. Okay, simplifying with imaginary numbers, 1.6. That would be it for the week. Again, homework assignments in this class are going to be due on Monday. So let me know if you have any questions.